Hello everybody, welcome back to the Whippy Library's YouTube channel for our virtual programs. This week we're going to be doing another MakerLab. This week we're leaning a little more into the science side of making, and we're going to be making some fall leaf crystals. So if you can see here, these have some beautiful crystals formed on the pipe cleaner, and this is what we're going to be making. It's a super saturated solution science experiment using really simple ingredients. It's mostly just salt and water. So let's dive into it and get to the supplies. Okay, so the supplies that you're going to need for this project are some pipe cleaners. Now I managed to find some in some nice fun fall colors, so if you happen to have orange or yellow or red or brown hanging around, that would be great for this project so it can actually look like a fall leaf. If you don't have pipe cleaner at home, you could also make your leaves out of construction paper, or you could go outside and find some leaves on the ground and use this project to make real salt crystal leaves. You'll also need a popsicle stick and potentially some tape to hold your pipe cleaner leaf onto your popsicle stick. You will also need some paper to trace a leaf onto and a marker, and a glass or a jar. Try to make sure that it's clear so that you can see the crystals forming. Also great if you have like an old spaghetti jar or something that you can take out of your recycling, just give it a good wash and then you can use that. And you're also going to need a pot and a spoon so that you can boil your water. Finally, you're going to need a lot of salt and some water. Now for me, I used about 1.5 cups of water and 1/2 cup of salt, but that's gonna vary between the size of the glass that you're using. All right, so let's get started. So the first step is to pour your water into your pot. Now make sure that you have a grown-up helping you when you're near the stove. So here I used about 1.5 cups of water, but that will depend on how big your jar is. So you might need more or you might need a little bit less. So once you have your water in the pot, you're going to turn on the burner and bring the water to a boil. Now again, make sure that you have a grown-up helping you because the water is going to get very, very hot. So as you can see here, it's starting to bubble. So now we're going to get the salt ready. So for me, I used about 1/2 cup of salt, but again, that's going to depend on how much water you're using and what the size of your jar is. So you might need more, you might need less. I poured it in little amounts at a time and gave it a little stir with the spoon. That way I could see that it was dissolving. So you want to make sure that the salt is dissolving into the water, and you want to pour enough salt in to make sure that there's a bit of a layer of salt on top of the water. So you'll see that start to form as it cools down. So once the water comes to a boil, you can turn off the stove and just let the salt crystallize in the water. So you can see here that there are some crystals forming on the top. So I'll stir that in, and we'll let them form again as it cools down. You want to make sure the water isn't too hot when you pour it into your jar, or else it might break. So make sure that you let it cool just enough that it's not too hot, but it's still warm. So the first step is to take your tracing. So mine is of an oak leaf that I just traced off of the computer. So you're going to use this as a guide for your pipe cleaner. So I'm going to lay that flat on my surface and get my pipe cleaner. So what I'm going to do is line up the pipe cleaner with the lines of my leaf. So it doesn't have to be perfect, just as close to the leaf as you can get it. And don't worry, you can always fix it afterwards. So I'm just going to wrap it all the way around and make sure that it's getting in the corners as well so that there's some definition to the leaf. So here, there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to take the ends here and twist. So that will create the tail of our leaf, just like this. So now I'm going to kind of move the leaf around just to make sure that it's nice and defined. Just like that. Okay, so the next step, we'll move this to the side and get our popsicle stick. So what you're going to do is take your popsicle stick and wrap a little part of the tail of your leaf around the popsicle stick. Mine, I just kind of folded it over once. If yours doesn't stay, just use a little bit of tape to make sure that it's stuck right onto the popsicle stick. So this way, when you put it into your glass or your jar of water, the leaf isn't going to fall to the bottom or lean to the sides. It's going to be suspended right in the middle. Okay, so now what you're going to do is pour your water into your glass or jar. Now make sure that you have a grown-up helping you because the water may still be very, very warm and you don't want to get any on your hands. So once you have all of your salty water in the jar or the glass, you're going to take your leaf with the popsicle stick and you're just going to pop it right in. So what you're going to do is try to make sure that the edges of your leaf aren't touching the glass. It's okay if they are, but just try to make sure it's not all the way around touching. And basically now the waiting game begins. You're going to see as you watch, little salt crystals will start to cling onto the pipe cleaner all around it. And this does take a bit of time. I will probably leave mine here for 1 hour and then check in and then leave it for maybe another hour and keep checking in. So as you can see here, I made a time-lapse video to show how the salt moves in the water to attach onto the pipe cleaner. So I made mine with 2 different salt and water solutions, one with more salt and one with a little bit less salt so that you can see the difference later. So this one here has less salt, so it's not clinging onto the pipe cleaner quite as much. Now, this does require lots of patience because it does take some time for the crystals to cling onto the pipe cleaner. This solution here is the one that has more salt. So you can see the layer still on top of the glass. The salt crystals are still kind of clinging to the top. So they are going to, as they fall, cling onto the pipe cleaner. This one here, again, is the one that doesn't have quite as much salt. You can still see it moving around in the cup. But there's not quite as much clinging onto the pipe cleaner as you'll see is clinging onto the darker purple pipe cleaner. So as you can see here, there's even more salt crystals clinging onto the pipe cleaner. So that's because I used extra salt. I used more salt in this solution than I did in the first one with the orangey red pipe cleaner. So it's all going to work still, but it depends on how big you want the salt crystals to look. I found that the purple pipe cleaner had very large, chunky ice crystals, or salt crystals, but the red pipe cleaner, the crystals were very small. Okay, so now it's time to compare the results of our crystal experiment. So the first leaf, the red leaf, you can see there's not too many crystals formed, and the ones that formed are very small. Now this is because the water didn't have enough salt. So what happens when you're trying to make your salt crystals? You need a super saturated solution, which means that there's so much salt in the water that the water can't dissolve any more of the salt, and that's why the crystals will start to cling onto each other and stick to the pipe cleaner. So this one, the solution was not super saturated. So you can see how there are some crystals, but not a lot. So let's compare that to the second pipe cleaner, which did use a super saturated solution. So this one, you can see the crystals are much larger and they look really cool and spiky. So these ones really kind of look like snowflakes stuck to the leaf. So what happened here is I used extra salt. So if you want to make sure that you have great, really big crystals stuck to your leaf, use extra salt. Now I'll show you both of them side by side. So you can see the not super saturated and the super saturated. So what happens is as the water evaporates from your jar, the salt starts to cling to each other and then it sticks onto the pipe cleaners, creating these really super cool crystals. Now, it works both ways, but more fun to see the big crystals. And it does take some time. For both of these, I left them in the water for about 2 hours and then hung them to dry after I dumped the water out of the cup. I just hung them back in the cup or the jar. You can leave them for longer if you'd like and see if that changes the size and the shape and the number of crystals you have as well. And it does take about, I'd say a few hours to dry. I let mine dry overnight, and when I checked them the next morning, they were pretty dry and the crystals were all really well formed. So at least 1 to 2 hours, and then you can let them dry, or you can try to experiment for longer and see what happens to the crystals then. Okay, and that is this month's MakerLab complete. I hope you had a great time learning how to make your own salt crystals. If you make these at home, make sure you take a picture and you can tag us on social media using the hashtag #DoorwayToDiscovery. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We'd love to see them. You can also find us here on YouTube, so make sure that you're subscribed to our channel so you never miss one of our virtual programs. You can also find us at whippylibrary.ca, where you can find out more about our programs and our collections and search our online catalog. All right, have a great week, everybody. We'll see you soon for another video. Bye.